Hello my fellow writers, my name's Lara and welcome back to my channel, Learn to Writer, where we deal with the mental challenges of being a writer. If this is your first time here, I am so happy to see you, and if you've been here before, may the words be ever in your favor. Today we're going to be dealing with kind of an interesting topic, and it's one that I have had a little bit of trouble with recently, and that is when you need to kill your darlings. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, you may have heard the advice before, kill your darlings. Kill your darlings is like an advice. And basically what a darling is it's like a character or a scene or just a situation in the plot that you write and you think it's awesome and you love it, and then it ends up causing problems, getting in the way of the story that you're trying to tell. And because we love these darlings, we love whatever this thing is that we have written, sometimes it's very hard for us to accept that they don't fit within the story. Like, we want them to fit so much that we put a lot of effort into it, and we're not willing to admit that they don't fit. So this is what happened to me recently in my current work in progress, which is right now codenamed Avalia, because that's the name of the world and I don't have a title for it yet. But anyway, I wrote a scene in there. It is beautiful, it's thematic, the first kind of really intimate scene between my main characters. It wrote into the story just fine, when I was writing the story, and then, I needed to add some more backstory. I needed to add some more scenes where the characters are getting to know each other and they're having certain conversations and all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote a scene that was going to happen before this scene that I wrote that I love so much, and I was having a ton of problems with it. And I spent weeks on this new scene with trying to figure out how to put the information in, knowing it wasn't right. It wasn't until after I had done a whole lot of work that I realized that I needed to get rid of that scene, and I really didn't want to get rid of that scene because it was beautiful and perfect. And I mean, it kind of is beautiful and perfect, but not beautiful and perfect for the story. Once I realized that that scene needed to come out, once I made that decision, then the scene beforehand, I stopped having the same problems. I finally had some breakthroughs that was oh, okay, this is how the scene is supposed to work because that other scene isn't there anymore. And it was hard and painful, but it was also necessary. Before we talk about exactly how it is that I figured out that scene was a darling and I had to get rid of it, I do want to add a couple of caveats on this kill your darlings thing. First is just a blanket piece of advice in don't ever delete anything that you write. It doesn't matter if it's not going into your book. It doesn't matter if it's terrible, horrible, and you never want to see it again. Take it, create a little folder or a little file that is graveyard, trunk, the bowels of the abyss, and just take that writing and put it in there, and then just leave that somewhere on your computer. Space is cheap, so there's really no reason to get rid of that. You might think that it's terrible now. It might not be as terrible as you think. You might be able to use it for something else. It's just a general rule to never delete anything. So if you do end up taking a darling out, be sure to keep that somewhere, even if you don't want to keep it in the same file where your story currently is. The second thing, a caveat, is to make sure that you understand that a darling is not something that you write that you like. I heard a story one time of a writer who, anytime they wrote something that they really liked, they would just take it out of the story because they thought that meant that it was a darling. The darling is something that you write that you really, really like that does not fit with the story that you're trying to tell. If you write a character that you love and their motivation causes conflict and causes the story to go forward, that's great. Or if you write a scene and it catapults the story forward. Like, these are good things, right? It's not a darling because you like it, it's a darling because you like it and it doesn't fit within the story. It has to be both of those things at the same time. Otherwise, you're just being a good writer. You wrote something that you like, and more than likely your readers will like it as well. So now we're going to come down more to the clarity of how I figured out that this scene was a darling. In general, as with any problem that you're going to run into with your story, anytime you get stuck on something, the first thing that you have to do is you have to figure out, okay, what exactly is it that is the problem here? If you have a writing group and they're like, we think that this part is kind of weird, that can be one way. Another way is your writer's intuition telling you this really isn't working for some reason. And a third way can be that you legitimately cannot go forward, which is what was happening here. Like, I was trying to write this scene in over and over and over, and I'm like, oh my gosh, none of this is right. Technically, it started with, I wrote this scene, all of the events that I thought needed to happen within this scene, and it was just falling flat. It didn't feel right. This again is my writer's intuition telling me there's something wrong here. I didn't know exactly what it was. Obviously, that's why we're talking about this. I knew it wasn't the writing itself. Like, my writing of it was fine. Like, the words that I was putting down were fine. But the character's motivation seemed a little bit off. There's only the two characters in this scene. The order of events, the order that the things were happening within this scene just seemed muddled. Like, I could move them around, and I did some of that trying to get that to work, and it just kind of remained muddled. There was also a lack of conflict, which is definitely one of the main ways to have something be flat, like a scene or whatever. If there's no conflict, if there's no stresses within, like, between the characters or between the characters and their environment or whatever like that is definitely a way to have a scene fall flat. I knew that the scene wasn't working. That was my I have to look into this a little more deeply. And so that's when I started drilling down into these problems. I went back earlier in the story. I followed my character's motivations, like, from the scenes prior to this through into these scenes, to make sure that they were all consistent, and that didn't really end up being the problem. I took the order of the events, the things that were actually happening within the scene. Like, there were certain conversations I needed to have happen. There were certain things that they needed to do in order to have some of the conversations happen. I tried moving those around. I tried taking some of them out. I tried leaving, writing some new ones. Like, I tried moving all that stuff around, and it never got to the point. Like, I know something's working when it flows a certain way, and again, that's my writer's intuition, but, like, the more that you write, the more that you know when your writing is hard, and the more that you know when your writing is working, and that generally means that, you're producing something that is worthwhile. I was doing that, and I was not getting that flow that I was looking for. I even tried pulling out a 7-point story structure. Well, that's technically for the entire story. You can take those same points and have those apply to something smaller, like a scene or just a conversation or whatever. Part of that is making sure that you've got conflict in the right places and all that kind of stuff. So, like, I tried doing that with the scene. I even wrote some random characters just came in and, like, tried to cause a problem to, like, just create conflict. And very quickly realized that wasn't working. But again, that was another thing I tried, right? I was like, okay, if I can get conflict in here, does that make something happen, right? And it was only after doing all of this and working on it for several weeks that I finally had the realization that it was this darling scene that I had that was like the next scene that I was going to be getting to after I finished all of this. Again, the realization of this does come down to my writer's intuition, but part of it was that I had tried fixing it with all of the other methods that I knew, and none of those had worked. If I had gone through, smoothed out my character's motivation, and made sure that my character's motivations were like the same throughout the whole thing, and then suddenly that scene started like working, it wouldn't have been that scene's problem. It would have been the motivations, right? Or if I had put the story structure there and suddenly everything had fallen into place, right? Part of the reason that I knew that that other scene was the problem is because everything that I tried to fix was not actually the problem. Fixing it didn't fix the problem. Of course, there are other things that I could have tried that may have worked. There's the possibility that it was always that scene, and taking that scene out was the only way that it was ever going to to work. And that's just a thing that you kind of have to deal with as a writer, right? Like, you're not always going to find the perfect solution, but you want to keep going until you find the solution that does work. And so taking out that darling scene is the thing that ended up working for that. Now, like I said, if your writer's intuition doesn't necessarily tell you that something was wrong in a situation like this is one of the other reasons that we have a writer's group, or that we have writer's groups, or other people, like you have other friends read your writing, and then they say, this really isn't working, and, you know, you might not have caught it, but they do, and then you look at it and you're like, okay, this is a little bit funky, right? And then that's when you dig down into it, you use all the skills that you know, that you can try and figure out what the problem is, and it might come down to being, yeah, that scene really doesn't work, but I love it, I don't want to get rid of it. Like, if you ever catch yourself thinking, but I don't want to get rid of that, that's not like an automatic, oh, that's definitely a darling and you have to get rid of it. But you have to then consider what it would do if you got rid of that thing, right? You have to kind of be like, okay, am I resisting to getting rid of this because I think it's awesome and I want to keep it? But you have to be honest with whether or not it's working within here. And obviously, this is not the first time that this has ever happened to me. It's probably not the last time that this is ever going to happen to me. The more times that you have a specific problem, you just get better at identifying it. I once had a story, it's now a trunk novel, where I had this adorable little character assistant named Che. He was super adorable. I loved him. He was like the assistant to a new king, keeping his schedule and giving him advice and all this kind of stuff. And I realized about 2/3 of the way through the book that he was just completely superfluous. I didn't need him. The other people who were around this king could basically do the exact same thing that this character was doing, and this character being in there was just muddying things. Now, he wasn't a main character, and so after I realized, okay, you're just keeping him in here because you think he's super adorable and you like writing the character, taking him out was not really that hard. The story was tighter for it. It did still end up becoming a trunk novel, but that was for a completely different reason. It was much earlier in my career, too, so I wasn't as good of a writer yet. That's why trunk novels happen. You know, generally trunk novels happen when we try to write a story that we're not quite ready for yet. Then I had the Law of the Demon King story, which is the sequel to Law of the Prince Charming, which I've mentioned before on this channel. And I actually had a main character in that story where she was plot related. She was like interacting with the main characters. She was like there. She had a purpose for being there. She had things to do at the end of the book. And I was just having trouble with this book. And I still remember the morning I was driving to work and I realized that she needed to come out, and I like legit cried because, you know, she was a darling, and because taking her out as like a main character was very, very difficult. Taking out the scene or taking out that one character that I mentioned before, pretty minor effect on the story. Taking out this major character, it took me months to pick her out of the story and to change the scenes such that other people were covering the things that she was doing and rewriting the ending and all this kind of stuff. Like, it was a hassle. But after I did take her out, the story worked so much better and I was able to finish it, which is, you know, what I was unable to do when she was in there. It doesn't even come down to how big of a part that darling happens to play within your story. They can be tiny and they can be huge. The one main thing is that it being in the story keeps the story from working the way that it needs to work. As writers, this is just another one of the problems that we have to learn how to identify and to solve. Sometimes we write stuff and we love what we've written, but it just doesn't work for that story that we're trying to tell at that time. This doesn't mean that it was wasted time, because it helped us learn. The actual writing and the learning to identify how to take it out, the fact that we need to take it out and to take it out, are all things that we've learned. And remember, it's so hard to get rid of darlings because we love them so much. And we love them because we did a really good job writing them. So if you like this video, go ahead and like this video. And if you'd like to watch more of my videos, you can go ahead and subscribe. Hopefully they are useful to you in some way or another, or entertaining. That is also good. But I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye-bye.